Hello and welcome to this new episode in Keyboard Conversations. It's my great pleasure to welcome Beate Toyka to this conversation on Bach playing. We decided, in light of Beate's wonderful series on the Online Academy, Step into the 48, in which she goes through all the 48 preludes and fugues, that we would just have a little natter here. On aspects of Bach playing. We've got all sorts of subjects and topics here that we could pick from, but I'm sure we'll find that as we get going, it'll all flow as it should. And as we go along, if anybody does have any questions about Bach playing that they'd like to for us to address on part two, this will be part one. We're bound to want to do part two. There's no way we're going to cover all this in the time. Then do put your questions in the comments and we will look at them and get back to you on them. So Beate, maybe we could just start off with, I'd ask you about your influences on Bach playing. I mean, what got you into Bach playing? Why do you love it? Teachers, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, my very first piano teacher really brought it into the house, or she added to what was already in our house, because I come from a family with 7 children, second youngest, and there was quite a lot of music going on already. But she was harpsichordist and an organist. She's actually on the wall behind me as a young woman, and she was also a pianist. Although she then majored really on harpsichord and organ, and she was a friend of Albert Schweitzer's, and she was absolutely besotted with Bach, and she would talk about him even during dinner times, because she would stay with her whole family for a whole day and teach my brothers and sisters as well. She came from a town nearby. Adelheid Kröber was her name. It went completely over my head probably at the time, but my brothers and sisters were taught little preludes and fugues. I remember my brother Wilfred struggling but playing E minor little preludes. You know that one. And I remember I was probably 6 or 7, and him struggling with his 2 hands but enjoying it and sticking with this, and I'm distinctively aware of this conversation between the hands, and the hands doing interesting things. And I think I could probably at that time hear onto different levels without being able to put that into words as such. Another thing that we did a lot is, because we were a big family without a dishwasher, we sang rounds while washing up and drying up. And my older sister, who was a music teacher all her life and ran choirs and things, would teach us quite long rounds, some of them. And we quite naturally had to sing them as rounds. So we had to enter different parts, and it was a sort of a normal thing. And we would do it at table prayer. We'd sing it in parts, and that was a normal thing. And so, and then, and Johann Sebastian Bach, and of course, Christmas and Easter, we were in church, and we had friends who were in a big Protestant church. There was a lot of music in the Rhineland going on in church. There was always Christmas oratorio. There was hardly any Handel. I mean, we didn't do the Messiah, really. I think it's the first time when I was in England as a student that I heard the Messiah.
Well, so you're saying that Bach's music was very present in your culture in Germany, of course.
It was very, very normal, and one would hear cantatas, and really churches would put on quite regularly, not just concerts, but they would have their church choir sing bits of Bach as part of the services. So one would hear that. And of course, in Germany, church musicians are paid, so they're trained, paid positions. So these people would have gone through conservatoires for the music training system for church musicians, and they would be very good at improvising little introductions for hymns, also Bach and Luther hymns. We would go to both churches. My parents were quite ecumenical. And that was a normal thing as well. The training was good, and the singing of the choirs was quite good, even of these, amateur choirs. So, it was very present.
So it sounds like you're describing a situation that Bach was very familiar with himself, which is, the teaching of music or the practice of music was all round. You needed to be a musician. You didn't just need to be a keyboard player. So,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of his the two-part inventions and the other didactic pieces that were written as much to teach composition as they were to teach keyboard technique. It's
To teach
both.
children as well. To teach, I mean, of course, he had his children like the organ pipes, one learning from the other.
Mm.
In fact, I don't know if you had a chance to see that film, Das Weihnachtswunder. There's a new Bach film that was aired in Germany just before Christmas.
Oh no.
And it played in the Bach family. It was stunning. The children in all sizes and the mad rush to get things ready in time, and everybody copying music around the table because he'd run out of time for this. And it was just, I mean, we weren't like that. We weren't a composing family, but music was, yeah, it was definitely there. And I remember these lovely friends would come in on a Sunday afternoon, we visit them, or they would come to us. I played with the daughter really all my life. She's a violinist in Germany. And they said, well, what shall we play? Oh, Bach or Handel would be the chamber music choice. So we didn't, I don't think we even had jazz or anything like that in the family. I think we probably only had Telemann, Bach or Handel when it came to like little trio
Yes,
sonatas
triads and
or,
artists and things.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So you've used the word normal, like it's just natural and normal. What about Bach playing? Was that also natural and normal, or did you? Like I was when I went to the Royal College of Music. There was all this thing about historically informed performance practice, which stifled the pianist. We felt like we weren't really allowed to go near Bach's music because there were these voices from this is how you're supposed to play Bach and shouldn't play it on the piano. It sounds like you didn't have any of that stuff going on.
Well, I think as I grew older, and certainly when I went to the Musikhochschule, the Cologne Conservatoire, I got hold of that and I learned about that much more about editions and but
Hmm.
we weren't so much like the Dutch people who were so into all they were much stronger into the original performance practice, and in England also with Tovey and I don't Gardner later. I mean, all these people who are trying to do it properly, that came a little bit later. But what I had the great luck is I had an amazing other teacher, a lady who was also a composer. In fact, one of her recordings is on YouTube, but I don't know whether her recordings are available. I haven't checked that, but she's called Else Schmitz-Gore, and she made me do preludes and fugues, and absolutely insisted I memorize them.
Mm.
Started with the easier ones and things, and of course, when you do it a lot and you're a child, then it just happens. And she was quite strict with fingering and with not playing with pedal, but it wasn't. It was more that it came from her. I wasn't aware that it was a school or that
Right.
the movement, things like that led to the Bärenreiter edition being so text and so clear later on.
Mhm.
That didn't touch me at the time, but I had that good fortune until I was 18 and started. I just had done loads of preludes and fugues just because they're part of the diet. So you did the Chopin study, you did preludes and fugues, you did Russian scales, and then you did your other pieces as well.
But was there ever a situation where you thought that Bach belonged more to the studies? But like in Russia, this was very much that Bach was the sort of technical stuff. You did it because you had to. You had to do it as an exam requirement. But a lot of the time, I'm not saying particularly in Russia, but with that mentality, Bach got played kind of mechanically. It wasn't.
Oh.
There was no kind of love for it. It was just done because it was good for you, like eating spinach, I guess.
Okay. Excuse me. Well, the things that you teach, Graham, about taking the voices, about singing individual voices and doing, hearing something in your head while you play another voice on the piano, all these strategies to learning, say, a fugue. I didn't really learn that so much from her. I came across it as a teaching tool later on when I became a
Hmm.
piano teacher. But because my teacher was a pianist, she taught everything from the point of view of color, of clarity, of tempo, keeping tempo. She was a very good, very strict. So I had to practice with metronome quite early. But I think metronome with beauty. She didn't really do what you were describing in the Russian school. So maybe I was quite lucky, but I wasn't aware with friends who were also musicians that that happened. So that's maybe something reserved for the Russian school of.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily only Russians, but one thing I have noticed, there's this preoccupation with urtext editions, which is correct, of course, we should, is a lot of times people will come in, and because there aren't any markings on the score to do with dynamics, articulation, or words that we can use to, like, I don't know, expressive words that help us to come to a mood or a character, they tend to play very safe. So you get a kind of dynamic range from mezzo piano to mezzo forte. You get a kind of, they're either playing all legato or they think, oh, Bach's supposed to be detached. So you get it all staccato. And I've often found that there's a lack of engagement with the score because there's nothing on the score. They're used to seeing the score. It doesn't sound like that was true of your background. It sounds like you were making music with this.
Oh, I think we were. I remember also quite early reading a book about the Bach family, written by somebody as seen from his daughter. I always thought that his pieces were character pieces, that they had certain moods depicted in them, or that there was a jostling of, let's say, a husband and wife, or a brother and a sister arguing, or there was something an exciting run in the snow, let's say, or playing games or something like that. I've always sort of thought about those things. These pictures have always come to me, and it must have arisen from maybe conversations we've had and from Bach just being a person, not just a composer.
Yes,
Family
yes.
father, and we would be very, we know he had so many children. We were impressed about this and talked about this. Yeah, and about his poor wife, the first wife that died. And, even before he could get home, he didn't even know. And all these things, and the wig wearing, and yeah. And so I've always seen those pieces. And I think in the step into the 48, in my little introductions that I do to each of the set,
Mm.
I think I try and find something that makes a piece just unique, that makes it yeah, not a study or just saying, this is now in 12/8 and it's a jig, or
Yep.
this is in two parts and it's an invention. But I would say something like, this is an exciting search. Maybe somebody is looking for a girlfriend, and he's just trying to find her. And this piece, and so these two voices gradually approaching each other, or something like that. I try, and while I'm playing it and working on it and working on the fingering, this picture in my mind builds up about what this piece is about.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Absolutely. Because we do that with other music that's perhaps a little bit more of our time. I mean, I think a lot of us pianists, we're really romantic creatures, aren't we? When I say romantic, 19th century animals, the repertoire we're most comfortable with is usually repertoire that's written for this very instrument. And I was lucky enough to have some harpsichord background, and I studied harpsichord very seriously for a while. So I got used to understanding how articulation works with Bach playing, and how they had on the harpsichord, you've got a different way of making the music expressive, but on the piano we've got to make Bach pianistic somehow. Otherwise it's
Yeah.
dry and boring and tedious and not creative. So it sounds like what you're doing is encouraging creativity and
I hope
um,
so. I hope so. And I mean, after all the articulation he could get from his harpsichord and the expression he could get in a clavichord, and
yes.
he liked playing both, and both those things and more is in those preludes and fugues, and we just have to tickle them out. We just have to. It's all there, but the fact that it's not written on the score, that there's, well, occasionally, I think the G minor, for example, I've recently been working at that, is in book two. The prelude is a largo. It
Yes.
says that. Okay. All right, but you don't get a lot of that at all. It's very scarce. So that does not mean it's not in there, but the expression I would say, if Bach only had had a piano.
He wouldn't have written what he wrote.
No, probably not.
So I've always found with Bach playing that it's a question of transcribing it for the piano and actually using dynamics. Of course, we can't play all on one dynamic level because music's all to do with communication and sound and variety in the sound. So, I mean, I suppose that leads me on to pedaling. Were you ever self-conscious about pedaling in Bach? You said you weren't allowed to pedal. Was
Well,
that just in the Preludes and Fugues, or were you
no,
allowed some anywhere?
not being allowed. I resented it. And I remember when I played my LRAM at the academy, I did the A minor Book One fugue. It's a very long one, and I'm sure I've pedaled it a lot. It's very, very difficult.
Mm.
And I pedaled, and I just didn't really mind. I just wanted it to sound nice,
Yep.
and I didn't think much. I was not a very thinking pianist. I think I was always just doing, but I wasn't reflecting a lot, I think. I just had a lot of fun playing piece after piece and learning. But I did, and I've still got the old fingerings in there. So I'm now picking it up again,
Mhm.
and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what have you done? And I'm having to work it. Because now I'm thinking, yes, I will use the pedal occasionally just to connect things that are impossible to connect. And I use my middle pedal for those long organ points at the end.
Yes.
Definitely. And because that's just a great thing when that rings through the last 3 or 4 bars. Or I use, yeah, I occasionally use pedal, but on the whole, I'm now trying to, because I'm working at a real legato finger, at real finger articulation.
Mm.
So I'm trying, I have my foot off the pedal. I basically practice having my right foot off the pedal.
Yes.
I would never do in a romantic piece. It's always on, isn't it? But,
Yes.
but your right foot rests on the pedal.
But I think there's something fascinating about this whole subject of pedaling in Bach because, you know, while we don't want the pedal to muddy up the counterpoint, I never had any problem using it. And when I was in Andras Schiff's class in Dartington, 1982, I had the great fortune and privilege of being in his class. He was using and was allowing us, the students, to use pedal. He never mentioned it really. And then it was only after that that he went through his period of I call it the wilderness period because only an artist of his stature and a pianist of his stature could really get away with it, of just not using pedal for probably a decade or so. In Bach, and you're using, you know, the finger pedaling. I'm thinking of the E minor toccata from the sixth partita, all of the finger pedaling elsewhere. Of course, one would do that anyway. But it was, I thought, oh, okay, so he's really now done a kind of a U-turn on this because it wasn't an issue before, now it is. And just when he started to play in the Albert Hall, he did those amazing, the 48 was the first one I think he did, or was it Goldberg? And of course you can see, if you look at the recordings, you can see the dampers going up and down. You can see the pedal being used, and so he's obviously come back to it again
He
and
did
is
play
using
in
it.
a big hall. I mean, the Albert Hall is a very big space.
Yes,
It's possible that, you know, he will play slightly different in the recording studio to playing in the Albert Hall.
yes, true. But I do think he's had a change of philosophy there with the pedal, and I think
There is, I agree with you. For example, I've just got here this lovely C sharp major prelude from Book Two, and I think that's lovely with pedaling. It's just that sheet where this. It's such a lovely airy. It's like it's an otherworldly quality it gives it.
absolutely, absolutely, and of course. On the harpsichord, they would overhold those notes anyway, even if it wasn't written. I'm thinking about something like the C minor from Book One. I hear a lot of times people playing it like a toccata. I mean, it
Yes.
can work, but I rather like. So I'm thinking of a chorale. You know, the underneath, and then I'm overlapping a little bit, and then the second beat I'm playing a little bit more leggero. And I find that with that sort of sound, with that sort of touch, I can create the harmonic progression harmonically, and create variety in the touch that is much more interesting than that kind of thing.
Like in a Mozart Fantasia, you've got where you hold those notes, but in the E major, I mean, even that holding, that held of the
Yes.
it's sort of pedally playing, even if you don't always use the pedal, but you're doing so much overlapping and overhanging that the effect is almost as if you're using the pedal.
Yes, I mean that's the steel brisé or the steel
Yeah.
lutte, isn't it? So it's the same with the Goldberg aria. You've got that in the left hand, and then it goes to something a little later that looks like part playing. It's not really part playing. It's just here. I'll get to it. Here. It looks like it's a tenor voice, but it's not really. It's exactly that. It's the keyboard, the overholding, which Bach in those places writes out, but in other places doesn't write out. And but it's up to us to find that. I mean, I'm thinking of this little C minor, which was written for a lute originally, and a lute doesn't have dampers. So I tend to want to just hold on to those rather than that kind of sound.
So often, I think with Bach, like in so many other, it's so nice when you can teach also students to stay in touch with the keys for the legato playing, really for this sort of pedaled button, pedaled effect without actually having the dampers right up. But
Yes.
you need to stay in touch with the keys, not always just lift the fingers the same way. You need to like feel your way across the keys as if you're a string player. And I remember learning so much really from chamber music for Bach keyboard playing. And I remember doing the D minor concerto with a string orchestra around me. Just the first time I did it, just blew me away because you just then play the piano differently.
Yes, yes, because of the bowing.
And all these children were playing strings as well. It's the bowing is so natural, and if it can be transferred to the piano.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in a place where you don't find articulation marks, we have to kind of supply our own, don't we? Do you have any examples of, like in front of you there, Beate, of articulation choices that you've made, or anything in
I've got a
particular?
very crazy. I mean, this is a little bit, but probably the cockiest or the craziest fugue in Book One is the A major fugue.
Yes.
Almost not got a theme at all, but that's it. It's got nothing written of it. You could play it all staccato, but I think you would put a few little slurs in just
Yes.
staccato. So I would go all staccato, slur, then left slur. Can you see? So if you put
Yes.
those little slurs in an otherwise staccato landscape, it gets the staccato gets much more credibility.
Absolutely, and this is the sort of thing that when we get to Beethoven's music, it's written in. So it's easy to. I'm not saying it's easy to play Beethoven's music, but it is easy to know what dynamic level he was after, what type of articulation he was after, what tempo he was after. But with Bach, we just have the notes. We don't have the clothing or
I know.
the lighting for those notes. So
Now,
I'm thinking of something like. The B flat party to yes.
yeah, I also do the left hand.
Yes, exactly.
So the slow, that's because that's what a cellist would do.
Yes, and if one looks at the right hand, there's a kind of hidden, and then here an alto line or a secondary line. Yeah. So again, I'm overholding, I'm underholding, I'm playing leggero, I'm playing legato, I'm playing brioso style, a non-legato. I've got all of these things mixed up. And a lot of different lengths for the staccato. I'll never forget, this is slightly deviating, but there was a masterclass of Fanny Waterman. I'm sure you'll remember Dame Fanny Waterman. She was teaching a class, I was in it, and she went around the room and she asked everybody to name a shade of blue. And I thought, what on earth is this all about? I didn't quite understand where she was coming from, but she spent a few minutes, everybody named a shade of blue. She said, that's how many different lengths of staccatos there are, qualities of staccato, so I could play them all separated, but they wouldn't be generic, not that. And I could slur, I could do T up, P up, if I wanted to really feel that kind of one in a bar swing.
Yeah.
Um,
I do this all the time when I'm playing pieces that I've played before. I would try and playing with a different articulation and just see if that tickles out the character better.
mhm.
You have to try different things. You have to have a palette of, as you described just now, of different touches for what looks like the same notes, and then you mix these touches and see if you can create something convincing and new and vibrant and interesting.
And personal, because if you listen to recordings, different recordings, you'll find this person does this type of articulation and this person does another. So there's no universal correct one way of doing tempo or, articulation, which of
Exactly.
course is unsettling for people who want to play what it says on there. They want to be told everything. And I've got,
Rosalind Turek, Graham.
yes, of
Because
course.
we're all human, there'll be so many different ways of playing this music and still be convincing just because there's so many different people.
Beate, you mentioned Turek. Now, I actually met her once, and I had a colleague who studied with her. She was an absolutely fascinating musician, a brilliant person who really was a bit of a trailblazer for Bach playing. And
Wasn't she?
if people haven't heard Rosalind Turek, and I'm shocked when I hear of young pianists who don't know who she is, listen to her. So that's Turek, Tureck, Rosalind. You will find plenty of recordings of her on YouTube. She is fearless in her ideas. She has sometimes the very strange ideas. In fact, it was she who influenced Glenn Gould. So it was he heard her Bach and he thought, wow, is it really possible to do this in Bach playing? So if it weren't for her, we might not have had a Gould.
Is that not an amazing thing? I didn't.
Yeah.
I knew she was absolutely in her time as well. She was the only. She was a lone voice, wasn't
Yes.
she?
Yes,
In
but she did
performance.
some very strange things. She did some incredibly slow tempo
Yeah.
and also some very fast tempi. She did huge range of dynamics, and some of the sounds that she created on the instrument absolutely glorious. There's a live recording of the C minor partita, the Allemande. I think is one of the most beautiful unusual but fascinating documents on the Allemande of that partita. You can catch it on YouTube, and there's even a wrong note in it, which a little accident in the second half, which actually
All the better.
all the better for being human.
Yeah. Oh, great. I listen out for that. No,
No, have a look. It's fascinating. Beata, I think our
yeah.
time is coming to an end. Maybe we should. Well, I think this will be part one, won't it? I'm sure this will just be part one. We'll come back and do something on. We didn't talk about ornamentation, embellishment, which we can't do next. It'll take forever. Why don't we sort of start to wrap up? Is there anything you want to say in the wrap up process?
Oh,
Favorite
it's great
recording?
to listen to these wonderful pianists, but not to take, to work out your own way somehow in between. Find that path that fits your personality, and obviously work hard. Don't, give up. Practice with metronome. But I find Feinberger very inspirational as well, and of course.
Yes.
Yep. And
Yes.
Angela Hewitt, of course, also, but also Peter Hill is wonderful. I don't know if people know him. He's a Midlands pianist, Sheffield. He's
Mhm.
recorded 48. Anyway, but that is another topic.
That is another topic. So maybe we should save that. So what I could do now, just let's wrap up, and just by inviting people, if you've got any questions about Bach playing on the piano, that is, put them in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, and we will, when we do part two, we will have a little list of things that people want to ask, and we can address them. So how about I just end by thanking you, Beata, for your lovely comments and fascinating reminiscences, and just say we'll look forward to seeing you again soon, imminently, I think.
Great. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.